Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we discuss aspects of music and musician life that may not be addressed in music school. I am Christine Smith, your host, and with me I have Sam Rothstein. Now, we are going to get together today and we're going to talk about a very interesting and important subject that is valuable to everybody, but to especially musicians in this day and age. We're going to be talking about mental health. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Sam. Clarinetist Sam Rothstein is currently the acting principal clarinet with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, having been appointed as the assistant principal and bass clarinetist with the ISO in 2015. He received his bachelor's degree in music performance from Northwestern University, where he studied with Lawrie Bloom and Steve Cohen. Prior to joining the Indianapolis Symphony, Mr. Rothstein was a member of the Richmond Symphony in Richmond, Virginia, and the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. He has performed with the Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, Virginia, New World, and Illinois Symphony Orchestras, as well as the Fort Wayne Philharmonic. Additionally, he was the clarinet player for the 25th anniversary National Touring Company of Les Miserables, and has also performed in orchestras of other various productions for Broadway Chicago. Summer festival appearances include the National Repertory Orchestra, Spoleto Festival USA, and the Tanglewood Music Center. After 2 summers as a fellow at the Tanglewood Music Center, Samuel was invited to return for a 3rd summer as a member of the new Fromm Players, focusing on the study and performance of contemporary music. And you may know him best as the host, producer, and founder of the podcast and YouTube channel, The Candid Clarinetist, dedicated to providing students and aspiring professional musicians with incredible resources and insight into the daily lives of people in all aspects of the industry. So we are lucky and just very privileged to have him here speaking with us today. So Sam, welcome to Musicians versus the World.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here and speaking with you, Christine.
Well, first, before we get started, I want to say thank you for your Candid Clarinetist resources, because I think I've talked to you about this before. My daughter started clarinet just a couple years ago, and I'm a pianist, and there are many similarities, just in basics of music, but woodwinds and clarinets are their own completely different animal. And just having you as a resource to help me guide her as I'm helping her through her path has been I'm just so grateful for it. So thank you for giving that resource so freely to everybody.
Yeah, of course. And that was sort of my goal by doing it. So, because I kind of modeled the whole podcast and all those resources after something that I wish I would have had when I was younger or going through school. And so I'm glad that it's kind of caught on a little bit and it has this effect with people. It targeted exactly the audience I was hoping for.
Yeah, it's so useful. So have you always been interested in the clarinet? Did you start with that? Or did you kind of start with different instruments? How'd you get to where you are?
Yeah, so I played piano like everyone else. I played piano when I was very young, and I kind of gave it up at some point. I don't remember exactly why, but I was always interested in music. My dad, he doesn't really watch TV. He has a stereo system, so he would listen to music all the time. So I was always around it, and one of my favorite CDs that he would play for us is the Benny Goodman Trio, and so I just got really gravitated towards the sound of the clarinet. And the story goes that I guess my 10th birthday, that's all I wanted was a clarinet and lessons. And so I started playing clarinet, and I'm still playing clarinet 23 years later. Yeah. So it's been a huge part of my life.
Yeah. Now, do you go into jazz like Benny Goodman, or how did you?
Oh gosh, I wish.
Classical?
No, I wish I could. We actually have one of our bassoonists is a fantastic jazz musician. He plays saxophone and clarinet and all that stuff. And he's offered to give me lessons, but it's definitely a different vibe for me. I wish I could do it, but
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's a totally different discipline. Yeah, it's like speaking a different language. I mean, it's all we're vocalizing the same, but it's just a totally different understanding of what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you also play bass clarinet, and that's very different from just the soprano clarinet.
Yeah, it's different in a way that obviously it's bigger and lower and the reeds are different and everything. But it's the same kind of instrument acoustically. I mean, all the fingerings are the same and everything. Mm-hmm. So for anyone interested in trying bass clarinet, I always give the advice of try to make it as similar as possible to regular clarinet. And that's just But yeah, it's definitely, it's a really interesting. I started playing bass just because, my teacher played bass clarinet in the Chicago Symphony for a number of years, and it really gave me kind of a voice and a little part of the orchestra that I had never accessed before, and so I really kind of enjoyed that, and I felt like I was more connected to that instrument than I ever had been to my regular clarinet. So,
Wow, yeah. And what I love about your podcast and about your, just in general, your YouTube channel and everything is that you're very honest. And I know it's in the title, you're the Candid Clarinetist, but I appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability in the topics that you discuss when it comes to your career and the way that you are living your life. So what was kind of the motivation for you to be, I mean, it takes a lot of bravery to be so open. What was your motivation in doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while for me to get to that point.
Yeah.
But I think my motivation mainly was just, I feel like a lot of what's taught and a lot of what's kind of performed by teachers and people who are successful professionals is kind of they sort of mask the fact that they're just normal people and they have normal struggles.
Yeah.
And so my goal was just to be like, there's not this magic thing that happens all of a sudden where you transition to this world where you're teaching, high level students or you're playing in a professional orchestra. It's a slow kind of morph, and you still go through the same issues. And so, I'll have weeks in the orchestra where I just don't feel like I sound very good, and I'm struggling with my playing. And then, I'll go and teach somebody, and I have to kind of pretend that I'm not struggling. And so, my motivation for being really honest about it was just like, there's, it's okay to be struggling with things, because everyone's just kind of faking their way through it. It's just, there's different levels of experience and different levels of masking that goes on. And I just wanted to kind of break down that wall and just be like, no, they're actually just normal people that with normal life problems and normal struggles of, just getting, and everyone's just trying to do their best. And so I wanted to sort of, I don't want to say blur the lines, but just know that there's an even gradient that goes from becoming, a student to a professional. And I wanted to help people along the way. And I was fortunate that I had plenty of people that helped me. I did a lot of learning early on, sort of thrown into the fire kind of deal. But I had a lot of people that took me under their wing and sort of taught me, how things are when you're a professional. And it's not this, it's wonderful and amazing, and I wouldn't trade my career for anything. Right. But that's not entirely true, but you know what I mean? I love it is what I'm getting at.
Of course, yes.
My marriage is obviously very important, so I had to rethink that statement. That's the most important thing. But yeah, it's just not this like magical fairy tale land where we just go and we play this incredible music and people are moved and they go home and think about it for years. It's a job, and there's struggles just like there are for any other job. And so I just wanted to kind of make people aware of that, because nobody's really going to tell you that in school, because you're so focused on getting better at your instrument or your papers or whatever you have to do. But I just wanted to make people aware that it's like, yeah, it doesn't end at any point in time, not to scare anyone, but there's always going to be something, and that's okay. That's just kind of how it is.
Mm-hmm. So when you have these open conversations, and you said that you've taught some students, have you ever gotten the idea that maybe some of the honesty and some like talking kind of about the harder parts of the profession has deterred some of them from wanting to go on, or is it just kind of equipping them with the tools that they need when they want to go on?
Well, I think it's made them relate more. I don't think it's deterred anyone per se. I think it's just made them relate. Like I've gotten messages from people saying, "Oh yeah, I was really struggling with my reeds, and I was really happy to hear that like even you struggle with your reeds too."
Yeah.
So I think it's made myself and my colleagues and the people that work in the orchestra world a lot more relatable to them. Yeah. So they don't feel like they have to like crest this giant hill in order to get where they want to be.
It kind of breaks down that sort of shield of mystery.
Yeah, exactly. It's very like, even like audience. I mean, they talk about a lot about like breaking down the barrier between the audience and the orchestra. I kind of wanted to break down the barrier between like the orchestra and the the students, and make that more accessible.
Yeah, no, I can see that, because I was thinking about when I was a student, there's a lot of pressure when you're a music student. And I think that when my professors were honest and said, oh no, I have had troubles with, like, say, performance anxiety or something along those lines, it makes you feel, it takes away the guilt of having those issues, because you know that someone successful has also dealt with and been able to overcome issues as well.
Right. Yeah. Or is still dealing with them.
Right. Right. And they have the tools and that they can help you with that.
Yeah.
And I think that goes along with the topic I wanted to talk about today, and that is mental health with musicians. And this is a very important subject. And I think that the COVID pandemic has really brought to light a lot of shortcomings in our profession, in the music profession. There are some really interesting statistics that I would like to share. There was a 2018 study from the Music Industry Research Association that 50% of musicians reported battling symptoms of depression, compared to 25% of the general population. So this was even before COVID. Musicians were having twice the amount of depression. And then a 2019 study by the Swedish digital distribution platform Record Union said that 73% of independent musicians have battled stress, anxiety, and depression. And that was even before COVID hit. And so many musicians found themselves out of work. And I know that this is a very a dear subject to your heart. And so I would love to get your general ideas about mental health and musicians and what you've seen in your career on that subject.
I think it's, and I'm going to try my best to hold it together here, because it's a tough subject for anyone to talk about.
Right.
But I think that it's such a hard career because there's no answer. There's never an answer. There's never 2 + 2 = 4. There's never a measurement that you have to take, and that's going to make the house you're building not fall down. It's this perpetual kind of like working to get better, but you don't know what better means or how you reach the point that you want to reach. It's just kind of like a circumstance. And so that can be really destructive, because it feels like it's almost Sisyphusian, where you're working towards something and then the rock kind of pushes you down the hill and you're not really sure like where the end is. And so I think that really contributes to a lot of mental health issues in our industry. That combined with the fact that there's a lot of pressure in music school, as you said, a lot of teachers are very unforgiving and very not empathetic to that.
Right.
Combine that with the fact that, it just feels like every day the world's falling apart a little bit more. Whether that's happening or not, I mean, that's sort of the news cycle these days. Right. And so, my wife teaches now, and I just feel so bad for those kids, because I mean, their first 2 years of college have just been like, what is going on? So I think that all those factors just really contribute to or can contribute to a really toxic environment, and it's really degenerative to people's mental health. And I've struggled with mental health even before I got serious about music, so it was always kind of an issue for me. But I've seen it in musicians. I've lost friends, and sorry.
Oh no, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Yeah. So it's tough. And the reason I want to be open about it is because, excuse me, other people are going through it too. And, just know that you're not alone. And I think that people are willing to help. And so that's the reason that I try to be open about it. And I'm always there if people need to talk about it. And so I apologize again, but it's a really tough thing. And, it's important to know that everyone goes through those struggles and you're never alone and there's always someone to talk to.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it is that is stopping people from reaching out to others?
That's tough. I'm not really sure. I was fortunate that I had a great support system with my family, and they've always been helpful with that. But I think a lot of it's just a lack of a support system. Maybe they don't have a strong family or a strong friend group, if you can imagine just being alone at a music school where you go to your lesson and your teacher tells you that you're not very good, and then you go to rehearsal and the conductor tells you you're not very good. And then you go home and you have nobody to talk to about it. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's a big contributing factor. And so they just don't have any release outlet to talk about those things. And so, so it's just important to know that there is an ecosystem and there's lots of resources, where if you need help, you can get it. And that's really important. And I think that everyone should be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Again, I am so sorry for your loss. And
it's okay.
it's very, okay. It's a sad topic. It is. Yeah. It's a hard topic. And I think what you were saying, you go to your lessons and you have a teacher who tells you you're not very good. And then you go to your rehearsal and then you have someone telling, man, music school's tough. It's a hard place to be. And I think the first couple of years when I was in school, you would have, everyone has experiences like that. And then there was a certain level of competition between the students trying to figure out where they fit, and that makes it hard too, because they're probably the only ones that really know what you're going through because they're going through it as well. But if there's that level of feeling of like competition, it wasn't until later on, after we had a couple of years of school under our belt, that we're like, oh, no, we're each other's support group. We're not competing against each other. We are here to help each other.
And that's one thing too, that I want people to be aware of is like the higher up you get in the industry, like there's no such thing as competition. Like we're all friends and there's enough room at the table for everyone. And so I think the competitive thing happens early on because that's how you like get in the honor band or whatever it is. But it's not a competition when you're auditioning for orchestras. Like you're competing against your own self. You're not competing against other people, and it's a totally subjective thing too. So like I could play for one committee, and they could love me, and somebody else could play for that committee. They could hate them, or vice versa. So you're really just trying to do your best. And that was one I had a really big personal revelation where, the first summer I went to Tanglewood, I was playing around all these musicians that were just incredible and they were all my age and everyone was so friendly. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, aren't we supposed to be like jealous of each other or whatever? But everyone was just so supportive and happy and just glad to be there and making music with each other. And so, I think I think there's a lot of problems with music schools in that they can promote that kind of competition with, seating placements and concerto competition and like all that stuff. And I just don't think it's really a competition. It should be an avenue for learning collectively, and being around like-minded people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I think in order for that to change, that's kind of like a systematic kind of traditional change that's very hard to deal with. Like that's hard to do. What would you tell music students that are going into a situation like that? What can one music student do to create sort of an atmosphere of more support for their fellow musicians?
Well, I think one thing is it's a lot of personal growth. So, and this is something I still work on, is like the biggest thing is like, don't try to talk behind people's backs. I think that happens a lot where you'll tell them they sound great to their face and then you turn to your friend and be like, oh, they sound terrible. But I feel like that happens a lot. And this is something that it's a personal thing for me that I really try to improve on every day because I still catch myself doing it. So just like being supportive of other people's accomplishments and trying not to be jealous of them or envious of them. Because, if somebody gets a job in an orchestra, it's a time to celebrate and be thankful that you're there and you were able to play with this person or learn from this person or, know them as a individual. Like that's something to celebrate. I don't think that's something to be jealous of, because their track is going to be different than your track. And I think that's a good way of just promoting other people in the industry, is just like trying to celebrate other people's accomplishments rather than saying, oh, I can't believe that this person got that when it should have been me. I think it's just, if you promote an environment where everybody is supportive of each other, it's going to be a more successful thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that sometimes it even just takes one person to allow themselves to be vulnerable, like yourself, that to like stand up and say, no, we need to make this a more supportive environment, even amongst our classmates, even amongst our year. And sometimes people just need one person to stand up and do it, and be supportive. And then they'll be like, oh no, I like this. I like talking to that person. I think I'll be like them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think sometimes that is. And I think you're right about auditions being so subjective. They are really so subjective. And at the same time, perfectionism is a huge aspect of music. And you had a quote in one of your blog posts that I loved this. And it says, we are trying to achieve perfection in an area where perfection is unachievable. And it really is interesting, isn't it? That music, and especially classical music, is all about perfection and striving towards this goal. But because it is subjective, you're never going to be perfect. So where did you kind of come up with that idea?
Well, I think also one thing to know is like, you can't, even if you're note perfect, like you can always play a phrase more beautifully. You can always be more effective in a dynamic change or whatever you're doing. So there's no such thing as like a perfect performance. And for me, like, I feel like the best I can hope for is like 93% of what I was hoping to do. And even then there's still stuff you can improve on. So it's, I think that, just kind of changing the mindset to, and this is something that I'm chronically working on. It's, sometimes you have a rough day and the best thing you can do is just put it down and go the next day and be like, well, I'll try again tomorrow and see if it's any better tomorrow. But I think this idea of perfection is, you just can't, it doesn't exist in classical music. I know that people try to hammer it home, or they're saying, oh, well, I'm never going to get a job unless I can play this perfectly. Nobody ever plays anything perfectly all the time. But, you're never going to get there. So you just got to, the sooner you realize that it's never going to be perfect, and you just got to aim to be better than the day before. And sometimes you're not better than the day before, but if you're aiming to be better than the day before, then you're making progress. And that's really the most important thing.
Yeah. Making progress is the important thing. It's true. It's difficult though, when you are doing competitions or you're doing auditions, and like the base minimum is that you play it note and rhythmically and articulation perfect. And then they're looking for something on top of that. It's very difficult to get into that mindset of playing your best and striving and practicing for perfection, but then also letting go once you're in the performance.
Yeah. But I'll challenge that too, because even in auditions, like, I can tell within 5 or 10 seconds of listening to someone whether I like their playing. And so if I like their playing and they screw something up, like it doesn't really matter to me. So I don't even think you need to be perfect. I just think like your concept or how you produce sound and how you emote, and like that's a lot more important than like playing something note perfect to me. And I'm alone, I'm one person, there's obviously a committee of people, but I just don't think that, I mean, it needs to be really good. And like, if there's a pattern of like, you can't play anything technical consistently, then maybe it becomes an issue. But as long as you have like that baseline, I'm going to be forgiving of that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that like and I think that's a mistake that teachers make when they're preparing their students for auditions. And I'm mainly speaking orchestral auditions here, but when they're preparing their students for auditions, is they're like, oh, well, you have to do this or else you're not going to pass the first round. And And for me, if they don't make a quality sound, I don't really care how perfect it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they don't make a sound that captivates me, or a phrasing choice that captivates me, it doesn't really matter how perfect, quote unquote, they play, because it's a concept, it's a conceptual thing. So I think just striving to be just a little bit better, and listening to listening to players and musicians that you enjoy, and just trying to emulate things that they do. I think that's really important. Just building up this concept in your identity as a musician, I think, is way more important, in my opinion, than just, spending an hour trying to shed a technical passage.
But I like what you said about people figuring out their identities as a musician. So what are your thoughts about people wrapping up their identities as being a musician?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because you kind of, I don't want to say you have to do this, but I think that I probably wouldn't have gotten to where I was today if I didn't spend, I'd say I probably spent 4 or 5 good solid years, just every day, from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep, every decision I made in my life had to do with, am I getting closer to my goal of being in an orchestra? So spending time with friends, and like every decision I made was like, how do I get my practice routine in so that I can do this and get better? And like,
Right.
I feel like I needed to do that just to like put in the work.
Yeah.
But with that comes this idea of like your identity, and as a person being the same as you being a musician. And I think that, I think that a lot of people, that's all they have is they're a musician, and that's what they think about, and that's what they do. So that 4 or 5 years that I spent doing that, that's them for the rest of their life. And for me, I can't do that. I would get really dark and really jaded. Like I wouldn't be a good person to be around really anywhere, at work or at home. And it took me a while to kind of get out of that. After I got my job in Indianapolis, I'd say it probably took me a good year or two before I was like, okay, I can't just be affected all the time by what happens at work and how I'm playing that day. And like, I need to have a personal life. I need to have other interests. I need to have other hobbies, just to kind of make myself a more well-rounded person, so that, music is what it is, and I'm really good at it, and it's my job, but it's not who I am as a person. I'm a much more individualized person. Like how I play does not mean, like, because I play really well doesn't mean that I'm a nice guy, or vice versa. Because I'm a nice guy doesn't mean I play really well. So I need to work on that side of me. I spent a lot of time working on the musician side of me. Now I need to work on the other half of me. Anyways, I think that's how it's important to separate our identities, I guess, is the moral of the story.
Well, I think that just our culture in general has a problem with attaching our identities to what we do for a living. You meet somebody and you're like, hi, I'm Bill, I'm a doctor, or hi, I'm this person, I'm a teacher, or hi, I'm this person, I am a pianist, and so I think we wrap that up. But sure, you do learn a little bit about somebody when you figure out what it is that they do for a living, but it is dangerous, because then what happens when that is taken away? Like, what are you left with? And I think a lot of musicians have had to come to grips with that during COVID, because their performing was taken away.
Yeah.
And the thing that brought them their sense of self was taken away. And I think a lot of musicians had to deal with, who am I when that's gone? And that's been a really, really tough thing for people. For me, it wasn't so much during COVID, but I have rheumatoid arthritis. And so when I first had that, my hands couldn't move, and they were just blown up, and I wasn't able to play. And so it took me about 5 years to be able to get back to playing again. And so there were those 5 years of like, who am I now?
Right.
What is left? Like, what do I have to give to the world? And I think you experienced something similar, not the injury part, but with COVID, you had to kind of decide who you were outside of music as well, correct?
Oh yeah, big time. And I think now I'm in a much, much healthier place than I was before COVID. I mean, I was getting pretty wrapped up and pretty burnt out before COVID. Like I was, I was even considering like a career change before COVID, just because I was I was just struggling. Like it was so perpetual. with the orchestra and stuff. And I was just kind of struggling in terms of like, I just couldn't get everything to kind of line up. And then COVID happens and it got ripped away from me. And I was like, I need to figure out like what I can do to still bring value. And I credit my wife a lot to it because she's, and so what I figured out about myself is music. Like I think I'm a talented musician, but like, I don't think I was given the talent to be a good musician. I think what happened is what I'm really good at is I'm really good at getting really good at things very fast.
Okay.
And so like, if I decide I want to do something, I just go, I learn everything about it and I just dive into it. So podcasting was the first thing. And then I started streaming on Twitch. So I play games and I started streaming on Twitch. I became I wouldn't say very successful, but I like developed a following and I started getting an income from that. Then, so I have all these hobbies that I just kind of like figured out how to do. And so I realized about myself, what I'm really good at is like, I love the process of getting better at things. And so it was very liberating for me knowing that like, I don't need music when I can just do whatever and learn about something and get really good at it really fast. Okay. And because I love doing that. And so, then when I went back to music, it really helped me because I had that perspective on it. Yeah. And I just also want to say, like, I feel like I'm playing better now than I ever have. Right. Because it helped me free myself from like the chains of that burden, basically.
Yeah. And the pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think there's something so liberating about knowing that you as a person are more than the sum of your abilities. Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say that for musicians that are maybe starting to burn out or are starting to question, their identity and things, and maybe are going through trying to make decisions of whether they want to stay with music or not? What sort of advice would you give them?
Yeah. So the first piece of advice I always give to people is you have to enjoy the process. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like, I love the process. Like, I love sitting down with a passage I can't play, and then by the end of an hour or the end of a week, I can play it and play it really well. Like, I love doing that. Not that I love actually practicing, because it can be tedious at times, but I love like seeing the results, the fruit of my labor. So you have to fall in love with the process. I think that's why I got really good at auditions too, because I developed this process over time of like how I, start being successful in auditions. And I loved like improving that process and getting better at that and seeing the results from it. And so that's kind of my biggest thing is like, if you back away a little bit and just start enjoying the process of getting better and not necessarily just the results. You'll see the results later, but you have to enjoy getting there. You have to enjoy the process of getting there.
Right.
The next thing I'll say too is you have to find a way to balance your life a little bit. And, this goes to the concept, which I think we were going to talk about later of Ikigai, which is sort of this Japanese concept of balancing your life. I think that's probably the advice I would give. Just love the process and then find a way to balance out whatever music's not giving to you.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into that. So that Ikigai,
Sure.
So you explained it a little bit. There's 4 pillars: what you love, what you are good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. So how did you find this?
So I found this very early on during COVID. I started questioning everything, because it was when like nobody knew what was happening. It was just, pretty early, like April or something. And so I used to play with the Milwaukee Symphony, and Mark Niehaus is their president and CEO now. He used to be their principal trumpet player. So I emailed him because we had met a couple of times, and I was like, hey, can I talk to you? I'm thinking about, maybe going into orchestra management, because I was just kind of fed up with how things were going. Yeah. And, so he started talking to me, and, the biggest thing he said was, first of all, don't go into orchestra management. The second thing, the second thing he said was, I never would have left my job as principal trumpet if I didn't feel like I had to keep everyone else's job. And then the third thing he said is he started talking about this concept, and he started giving me examples of like other musicians who do things outside of the orchestra that kind of balance their life out. So for example, there's a clarinetist, or he's now retired. He was in the San Francisco Symphony San Francisco Symphony, excuse me. And he did bonsai. So he made bonsai trees or whatever the arrangements.
Right.
And so that was his passion. And so whatever he wasn't getting from the orchestra, he funneled his energy into that. So Mark really challenged me. He's like, you need to like make yourself a Venn diagram, figure out where music fits in there, and then find whatever the missing part is and try to figure out a hobby or something that you can focus on. And so I did that. So obviously I love music. So it filled that niche for me. I got paid for it, filled that niche. I always forget them. I'm sorry. I know you just went over them, but
no,
everything.
It's what you can be paid for and what the world needs.
What the world needs.
Good at.
So I'm good at it.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. So I was good at it. I loved it and I got paid for it. I wasn't sure if it was what the world needed. I think it does. I think the world does need it, but not in like a humanitarian way necessarily.
Gotcha.
And so, I thought back to when I was a student and I was like, I really wish I had a lot more resources other than just like my teacher or my fellow students to go to. And so that's when I started my podcast. And so I felt like the world, at least the music world, needed that.
Yes.
And so I filled that. And then I started kind of filling in the gaps with the rest of the stuff. So I love music for sure, but I also love other things. I've always had hobbies and stuff. And so I started, gaming is like board games has always been a big, so I started doing that and streaming that. And so that, so that kind of filled that for me too. And I started getting paid for it too. So I started like figuring out all these other spaces that I could fill in on my little Venn diagram. And it just really helped me. And I think I'm still finding that now. I'm finding different hobbies or different things I can do that kind of just balances it off. Because obviously, I get paid for music, like that one's covered. I love it, but I probably don't love it as much as I thought I did because I don't think I need it. I love it because I'm good at it. And I love that it's, I love the schedule. I love that I get to create art, but I wouldn't say I'm like, I go home and listen to Beethoven cycles, endlessly. Like that's not me. I don't love it in that way. And then I'm good at it, obviously, but I'm also good at other things. And then what the world needs, I'm trying to figure out a little bit more how I can fill that gap. But I'm definitely more balanced in that tree than I used to be.
Yeah. Have you come up with any new things? Have you tried any like new hobbies that you wouldn't have tried otherwise?
Yeah. So obviously I get paid for music, but we don't get paid like lawyers or doctors or anything. Right. So, I'm always looking for little extra sources of income. So, I've always loved sports. Sports has been a big thing for me. And so I started buying and selling sports cards. That's been a little side hobby for me that I've started doing over the past 6 months. And then about a month and a half ago, I started a YouTube channel, just sort of documenting my journey and doing little like videos and stuff. And it's been kind of crazy. I've really exploded over the last couple weeks, and I'm approaching 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. And it's something I haven't done for very long, but it's, I took all these things that I learned from podcasting and video editing and all this stuff and building relationships with people. And I kind of funneled it into this new thing now. And so I've been spending a lot of my free time doing that. And that's been a great balance for me as well. And that fills a lot of needs for me too, because I'm good at it. I love it because I've always loved sports and watching sports, and I'm getting paid for it. And I think people need an outlet to kind of get themselves away. And so I've gotten so many nice comments from people about how they enjoy my videos and all this stuff. So yeah, it kind of hits all the boxes as well. So I've got a nice little balanced tree at this point in time, which is great.
And it's interesting that it doesn't have anything that's like, what's just fun. That's not one of the pillars. Right. They're all like deep, meaningful, like what you love, not just, how you like to spend your time. It's what you love, what you're good at. It makes you think a little bit more deeply about what you decide to spend your time doing.
For sure.
I think having meaning to things and having a purpose to things does help with the mental health that we've been discussing today. So just to finish up, because I know I've taken a lot of your time today, but
No, that's okay.
what are some things that you wish people would know about mental health when it comes to musicians, or just in general? Some things that are misunderstood or about it that you would like people to know?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is like, if you need help, ask for it. Ask for it from a friend. There's plenty of hotlines. Ask for it from a colleague. Ask for it from a family member. And someone will put you in touch with who you need to see to get better. I think there's a lot of stigma of like, there's something wrong with me if I have struggles with mental health. I think that that's not true. I think a lot of mental health comes from a simple chemical imbalance in your brain. My brother also deals with some mental health things. And I remember when he first got on medicine, he was worried it was going to kind of like give him like fake feelings. You know what I mean? And I was like, no, like it's not, you're not like hallucinating or anything. It's just like, what it does is just kind of evens out the stuff that's not quite balanced. The serotonin and all that stuff in your brain. And so there's nothing wrong with you if you have struggles with mental health. And in fact, if you're a musician, you don't have struggles with mental health, I almost think that that's more of a mental illness than the other way around. Yeah. No, that's not true. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with you. All we're doing is we're just trying to help everyone through this crazy, crazy wild ride called life. And if anyone ever needs to reach out to me, I know a number of people have. I'm always open. You can message me on Facebook or Instagram, or you can email me, go to my website. Always happy to speak with you. I don't know how much I can help, but I certainly can point you in the right direction and empathize with you, because obviously I've been going through the exact same thing. So that's the biggest thing. It's just knowing that like it's okay to not be okay, and that it's okay to ask for help if you need it, and you don't have to like swallow all the things that are going on. You can externalize them and get help and get medication or get whatever you need to get. That's just going to make you feel better. And I think that's an important thing, and everyone deserves that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. How do people find you?
Yeah. So the easiest way to find me is on my website, candidclarinetistpodcast.com. You can also follow me on Instagram or Facebook at the Candid Clarinetist. Or you could just friend me on Facebook. I pretty much accept every friend request on Facebook, for better or worse. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. There's a contact form on my website. I know that's how you got a hold of me as well.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty good about responding. And if anyone wants to chat about anything, I am super open.
Well, Sam Rothstein, thank you so much for coming and talking with us, being so open and so vulnerable about this important topic. I think it's a great example to other musicians, and I'm sure that you are helping and continue to help people every day. So thank you so much for coming and speaking with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.